Hello, welcome to my live. This is Practicing Photography. My name is Doug Gabbard. Hopefully we'll get a few people viewing here. Let's give it another minute or two. Looks like we got a couple people popping in. So if you would, let me know where you're watching from. Put in the comments. If you're on Facebook watching, you can go to streamyard.com/Facebook. If you click that, then if I show your comment, you'll see your name. Otherwise, you'll see something that says something like Facebook user. There is someone that's said he hopes to get up and watch live. Lou Newell Studio. Hopefully I said your name right if you're online. Like I said, just go to streamyard.com/Facebook and you'll be able to see the live. So this channel is mostly about photography. If you've not seen my YouTube channel, check it out. It is youtube.com/c/practicing photography, or just use the search for practicing photography and I'm sure you will find me. But my plan for these videos is to do them every Monday at 6 p.m. I might change that. It just depends on participation and who all shows up and who doesn't show up. I run a photography club here in southeastern Indiana, small community. I started the club because there was nothing close enough to me. There was a lot of clubs in Cincinnati, but they were a little bit further away than I cared to drive. So I started my own club. And so this is kind of spinning off of that club a little bit to give them an opportunity to see a little bit more of my information I like to share. So I'm playing with a new application called StreamYard here. So hopefully I'll get used to that and be able to work through that pretty easily. So I've got a couple photos to share with you, and I also got some information on how to use your camera, especially if you're a beginning in photography. You might get confused from the dial. So let's take a look at the dial, because the dial is probably the most common thing that you're going to run into where you may have problems. And let's get rid of that banner off of that. So we'll hide that. So you can now see the top of my camera. I took this picture. This is probably my 5Ti camera, but there are a bunch of settings on this dial. And you can see the green A with the square around it and the plus sign. That is automatic. So automatic, when you have it on automatic, the camera does not know what your subject is. So the camera is going to do its best. It's going to do its best at trying to figure out what your subject is, and using the available light, it will try to pick out the right settings. Now, one of the things you want to learn about is the exposure triangle. We're not going to cover that in depth here. I do have some videos. I'll put a link in the description for how to understand the exposure triangle. But there are 3 settings in the exposure triangle: ISO, shutter, and aperture, that you want to get a handle on. So what we're going to work on is this dial here. Now, I'll be right up front with you. The settings I'm going to show you, I seldom use, probably have not used them other than trying to figure out how they work. Now, the settings starting from the green and going counterclockwise There's a box with a little flash with a cross in it, and we'll talk about each one of those. In CA, the person looks like it's looking straight down from the dial, and mountains if you keep going around counterclockwise, a flower, a running icon, and an SCN. The reason I very seldom use these is because what I look at the most is what I use the most is the P, TV, AV, or M mode, and that's a Canon. Sony, and I believe most of the other cameras, they'll use S for shutter speed and they'll use A for aperture. So like I said, if you're watching on YouTube, you can put comments. If you're on Facebook, you can put comments, but you'll want to go to streamyard.com/Facebook to give permission for Facebook to let me see your comments. So make sure you do that. All right, so we already talked about auto. Like I said, it's just going to figure out what's best for that exposure triangle when you're in automatic. If we move down to the next dial position, that position is called fully automatic without flash. Yeah, kind of self-explanatory. There's no flash with this. It's just fully automatic. Again, it does not know what your subject is, and it's going to use available light. So the purpose of this setting, most likely if you go to a museum or someplace, they have signs or they tell you no flash photography. And if you're still new at cameras and you're not sure how to use some of the manual or less automatic modes, then the automatic without a flash would be the place to go. Keep spinning around the dial. We've got creative auto. You'll be tasked something like you'll see in scene mode down, which is SCN a little bit later. You have to choose a setting to adjust. So it's automatic, but you can adjust the shutter or aperture. Like I said, I seldom use that because if I'm going to do aperture settings, I'll probably go to aperture priority. If I want shutter priority, I'll go to TV on my camera. So I don't see personally much use for the creative auto. I'm sure there is. If you use it, leave me a comment on how you do that. It'd be awesome. The next mode we're going to look at is the person, which is portrait mode. This is where the camera will try to blur the background. Think of this as aperture priority, and the camera is making a decision for you. And what it does is it uses a low aperture setting, which opens the aperture up a little bit more than normal to a wider opening, which makes the background blurry. Simple as that. It's an automatic mode that has a priority for aperture to give you a blurry background. So this is halfway through the dial, so I thought I'd put this in here. I am not affiliated with these at all, but I use Backblaze to back up all my photos online. It's for a small, I think it's about $30 to $36 for a year. I added a $2 extra to give me a little bit extra oomph to the package, but for about $30 to $35, I didn't check before I looked it up. What you get from that is it will automatically back up your photos and any external drive that you connect via USB to your computer. So my laptop has 1 terabyte of space, but I've got about 12 terabytes of drives in a drive bay connected to my USB. It backs them all up for that same price. It was an extra $2 a month that will keep the files for up to 1 year. If I do not connect my external drives for I think it's 30 days and I didn't pay the $2 fee, it would delete all the files and would have to reback them up. So for that extra $2, I went with the 1 year program. So that's called Backblaze, backblaze.com. And if you use that link, you'll be able to, I'll put a link down in the comments. So I will get a kickback on this. It won't cost you any more, but I'm not affiliated with them. What it does is if you sign up, I get a month or 2 free. So if we continue around the dial, if we look at the next one, it looks like a mountain. If you kind of turn your head to the left a little bit, you'll see that. And this is called landscape mode. The camera will attempt to get both the foreground and the background in focus at the same time, which if you kind of think about it, we're still doing aperture priority. So the aperture priority here is going to go with a higher aperture of the smaller hole, which means more is going to be in focus in the depth of field. So it's going to do its best. So that's what that's for. Again, I would probably use aperture priority if I did this out in the field. The next one is called close up, or some might want to think this is a macro mode. It's a software version of macro mode. It's going to adjust the camera. We're probably using apertures to get as best in focus as it can. This is when you're getting super, super close to the object that's trying to keep as much in focus as possible. Macro photography is a hobby, is a technique, it's an art in itself, and there are some awesome macro photographers out there. Do some searches on Bing or Google and you'll find some great tutorials on how to do macro photography. If I were to use any of these, this would probably be the one I would use and recommend people to use. If you just got a camera and you don't understand all of these settings very much, the running icon is a person running, and what we're looking for is things that are moving fast. If it's moving fast, we need a faster shutter speed. So the goal of this setting is to give you a faster shutter speed while adjusting the other two legs of the triangle, ISO and aperture. So it's going to try to get a faster shutter speed. This is great if you've got children or grandchildren playing soccer, baseball, football, whatever, and you need a faster shutter speed. This is probably where you want to be for those events, so you don't have to try to figure out all the three triangles with the other settings. So of all of these settings, and let's go to the last one and just briefly, because to be honest with you, I could not find a good use case for this. This is the scene modes that I mentioned above with the creative automatic. This gives you the opportunity to say, hey, I'm on a landscape, or, hey, I'm doing a close-up, or hey, I'm doing flowers, or I'm doing something that has a lot of motion and movement, so I need a fast shutter speed. To me, this is a redundant setting, and it's really, when you look at it, it's probably more complicated than aperture priority and shutter priority. So if you're going to learn the scene mode, you're advanced enough, you could probably skip to the aperture priority or the shutter priority. So like I said before, the two or three settings on here that if you want to start adventuring off of the green, which is 100% full automatic, you can go to a full automatic without a flash. That might be a use case for you when you need automatic, but you don't want the flash to come on. Portrait mode would be really cool if you're taking pictures of people, so it'll help try to blur the background for you. I like landscape mode. Again, it's going to help you try to get both foreground and background in focus. I have not played with the close-up mode very much. I typically want a macro lens to do that, not the software. And the last one that I would use and probably recommend the most is the running icon. The running icon is, like I said, for a faster shutter speed. All right, so that's my tip. I guess that's a pretty long tip. I've been talking for quite a few minutes now, about 12 and a half minutes. I thought I'd keep this down to 15, but I've got a few more things to share with you. Now, if I go to the next slide, let me shut this off here, see if I have any comments. No comments, all right. No worries. If you got comments, please feel free to leave them. All right, so the next slide is a couple of pictures I've taken. I did some bird photography. This one is 1 day out of my 1 week window. I'm gonna try to show you photos I've taken in the last 7 days. So next Monday, I'll be doing the same thing with photos I've taken in the last 7 days. So this was at a neighbor's house. She has a lot of bird feeders, and she says she gets orioles all the time. This is a finch coming in, and I've got a cardinal sitting here. The setup I have here, and I'll try to be better about this on future broadcasts. I'll take pictures of my environment. I didn't take pictures of where I was sitting and what this looked like. But I was about 10 foot away from these birds, and I had a very large zoom lens on there. I'll just show you a few of them. Here's one of the orioles, and this is, you can see the rod that the bird was sitting on. The quality of these is probably not the best because I could not share a second screen yet. I haven't got that set up. So I had to copy these into PowerPoint, and that's what we're looking at is PowerPoint slides. I love these red finch. This is the male of the finch. They're very popular around here, are very ubiquitous. They're everywhere. So I kind of like them. The female is a little bit less color. Actually, I don't think there's any red on her. You'll usually see them in pairs. And that same oriole, maybe another, was posed quite nicely for me. Now, if you're wondering what mode I set on this, so I just talked about the mode dials. Like I said, I seldom use the automatic modes that I just went through. Matter of fact, this setting, I was actually on aperture priority. And you can see the background is totally blown out, not blown out, totally blurred out. And that's what I wanted. I didn't want the background to be in focus whatsoever. I wanted the bird to be the main character here. I also had a setting on my camera to make sure the shutter speed was at least 1/500 of a second. So even though I was using aperture as my priority, I was paying attention to the shutter speed to make sure it was fast enough in case the bird was moving. And it looks like my other pictures did not make it through on my slides. Interesting. I did have another photo shoot that I was going to share with you. We'll stop it here with the birds, though. Maybe I'll share it next week. But I took photos of a 5K run on Saturday, and it was pretty awesome, but had a real interesting dilemma. The finish line, I was facing with the sun shining right at me. It was early morning hours, so the sun was shining right at my camera. So I had to try to get an angle and had to blow out the picture a little bit to actually get them in focus. So I will try to show those to you next week when I do this broadcast again. Leave comments below if you like this, if you joined. And I will see you next week. And I will sign off for now. And well, before I sign off, one last thing. Let's give you something to do. Take pictures that you can share with me. You can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. I'll put all those links down below in my description. Share photos that you're taking this week, and maybe I can post one on here, but make sure you give me permission to use that photo first. You have a great day.